All right. First thing we're going to do is a little bit of a sound check here because I didn't get in here for the sound check earlier. So, Joe, say a word or two. Let's see what we got.
Hello, everybody.
Joe Roy, did you hear that? All right, Brittany, you go ahead.
All right. Is that working?
You got it? Okay. Yeah. Mine needs to go up a little. All right. You got me over there, Ben? Listen to a story about a man named Jed, a war mountaineer. You want me to keep going? Yeah, can you hear me in the back, Joe? All right, here we go. All right. Well, I'm joined this morning by Dr. Joe Mason and Dr. Brittany Macerola, and we're going to talk about mental health, okay? And we have a little bit of a plan here. We'll see how we stick to it, okay? But we're going to begin with just them. Oh, you need, that's a good thing we need to move. Because what? You need a little bit that way. Okay, now we're better. All right. So what I'd like you to do is just tell the congregation a little bit about yourself, your family, where you were trained, and so forth. Okay? You mind going first?
Sure. I'm Joe Mason Irvin. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist with Prisma Health in Greenville. And I've been practicing for about 12 years, mainly in outpatient child psychiatry. And I'm married to Wayne Irvin, who's sitting over there. We will have been married 19 years this December. I have three wonderful children, Esther, Kenny, and Grace, who are also over there. And I will say my children have taught me more about mental health and human development than any of my training has taught me. What I like most about my job and about psychiatry is helping people understand that mental health is part of being a human being. It happens and can affect everyone. And I just am glad that we're here talking about it today. Thank you.
Really?
So I'm Brittany Rogers Macerola. I have been, I went to USC Medical School 2 years behind Joe, graduated in 2011, then went to UNC Chapel Hill for residency and fellowship. So just like Joe, we're both general psychiatrists and then child and adolescent psychiatrists as well. I'm in outpatient private practice. After moving to Greenville in 2016, I was originally with a group practice and then moved to my own outpatient solo private practice 3 years ago. And I'm married to Adrian Macerola. We just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And then Sophia is present. Roman is in Pelham Kids, which is a good thing for everybody, if you want to hear. And I agree with Joe. I think there's, I always tell people it's very humbling being a child psychiatrist once you have kids. It's not, things do not translate exactly from training to real life. And I continue to really enjoy what I do because I think we can so relate to what is, I think what we were talking about today, what is typical, and then, being able to help and understand and identify when things are not as common or typical or feeling more problematic.
Well, I'm going to try to facilitate this conversation, and I'm sort of acting on your behalf. I've got some questions here that I think would come from the congregation if we were opened it up to you to ask questions. All right. Now, the one thing that I started thinking about when the moment I sat down is that we don't have a timer up here. And we kind of promised ourselves, the three of us, that we'd do this about 25 or 30 minutes. So try to look for a trustworthy person with a watch who would tell us. Okay, Megan here, give us like 25 minutes. At the 25-minute mark, tell us, let me know, okay? All right. So the first question is this. Are mental health and physical health related? Are mental health and physical health related? So Brittany, I'll let you go first.
I would say absolutely. We can all appreciate that our minds and bodies are connected. I think so much of what is talked about culturally now really like aims to understand that and like promote that we know that meditation can be really helpful in lessening stress. We also know that psychological stress can cause real physical symptoms that are not in our heads. So just like going on a roller coaster, as it's ramping up and we have butterflies in our stomachs, we can feel that way before we get up in front of a bunch of people and sing a solo or get in front of the children's choir, perhaps. And so there are lots of ways that our physical and emotional health can cross over.
Okay. Joey, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think you summarized everything really well. That, of course, mental health and physical health are deeply connected. They're, if you think about when you're not sleeping well, or when you have chronic illness, or those of us who suffer from chronic pain, or even having just regular hormonal changes that happen in life, your mental health can be affected through all of that. And in the same way, like Brittany said, when you're experiencing mental health concerns like depression or anxiety, it can affect your energy and concentration, the way you feel, your appetite, your blood pressure, and overall how you're doing physically. So you really cannot separate the mind from the body.
All right.
We got human size,
On the sides, we need to just turn like,
really close to your mind,
thank you, Sam.
whole time.
Whole time. Right. Thank you, Sam. What are the most common mental health issues you see in your office?
Okay, I made a list of them. I think, and some of these are the ones I think that are most important and maybe most relevant to all of us today. So anxiety and depression are the top ones that I would mention. And also, since I see children, I wanted to put ADHD on there, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I think alcohol and drug use and dependence is also a major problem affecting people. And then a big one for all of us is loneliness and social isolation. So I wanted to make sure we brought that up. And I wanted to just make sure everyone knows, I don't like saying the word normal about mental health, but I just want to emphasize that anxiety and depression are healthy emotions. And when to become concerned about that is when symptoms are persistent, they're intense, or they interfere with your everyday life. So I just want everyone to keep in mind that it's healthy to have these emotions. And I think we do need to normalize that people are going to be sad and people are going to be depressed at times.
Okay. I imagine you see a similar group of people, but would you like to add anything to that?
So I agree. I think, what is most common, I would say, are folks experiencing depression, anxiety. I also meet with a number of folks who've experienced trauma-related symptoms, and ADHD as well. So I think lots of different concerns. In the last few years, I've also been working with some older folks as well. And so I think also talking about some typical age-related changes that can then impact how we feel, even in again, very typical, like it can lead us to feel sad when we can't do things that we could in the past.
Right. Now, what I hear both of you saying is there's a whole range of very typical things that the human condition that we're going to run into in our lives. Sometimes we run into them early, sometimes we run into them late, but we're going to run into them. Now, my question next is, how can we know when anxiety or depression moves from what is typical to more problematic? Because you said that having those feelings is normal. I mean, that we all have them. How do we know when we've crossed that threshold and that it's moved from something that's typical to a word that I've learned from you two, problematic? So would you go first?
Absolutely. So I think, if I'm talking to, let's say, a college student or someone who is working in an employed position, and we're talking about a stressful situation. So before final exams, before a big presentation, it makes sense that they could be experiencing some anxiety. But if that's short term and it's not causing severe trouble sleeping or loss of appetite, I think what Joe touched on earlier, how persistent, how short term or time limited versus how long term, how intense, how problematic is it to the rest of my life? All of those things are what I'm really listening for. Because again, if this is, gosh, the few days that I'm approaching this really big presentation and the anxiety is motivating me to work hard, it's not paralyzing me, and then I'm going into it unprepared, then it's healthy anxiety. But if it's something where I would say my baseline anxiety is too elevated, where day to day I'm struggling to focus, I'm always, often having a stomach ache, or I feel like my appetite is not typical. I'm feeling fatigued. I'm having sleep changes. Maybe I'm more irritable. I am having a hard time not thinking about these what if situations, where I feel like I'm worried about anything and everything. And it's not tied to a specific short term upcoming event. I think those are examples
Okay.
of what would be typical or not.
All right. So did y'all hear that? Did that come across? That there's some, if you're getting married and you're anxious and you're short tempered with everybody, that's par for the course. But if that's not the case, if it's prolonged, continues to creep up, you see your diet change, your appetite changes, then that's becoming problematic. All right.
And I would add, John, if we're finding ourselves that maybe we're so irritable that we're getting into fights in our relationship or our family relationships or our work situation, and we're having problems in those areas that are threatening our well-being, then I would say, even though it's an understandable context, maybe it's out of proportion
Okay.
to that context, and still I'm concerned.
All right. You want to add something to that?
I think she said it really well. When I'm talking to patients about the symptoms they're having, I always ask about duration, like how long has this been going on? Because I think that's important. And then, like Brittany said, the intensity of the symptoms is important. And then probably the biggest thing is how much is this impairing your day-to-day life, which can be at home or at school or at your job. Are these symptoms actually causing you a problem in your day-to-day life? And then that's when we decide if we want to treat or not.
Okay. At times, people who are struggling with mental health fear that reflects a problem with their faith. They're struggling with their mental health, and so they think there's something wrong with my faith. And if you go to some churches, they'll tell you if that's going on, they'll just say, well, you need to do what? Pray harder. All right. I don't think this is the case. I don't think that's the case at all. But I'd love to hear what you think about this. All right. So you'll go first.
I can go first and then let Brittany go. But I think this is the most important question that you're probably going to ask today. Not that the other ones weren't important, but I think this is
Time into this. Okay.
I mean, they're all really good questions, but I think churches, and I think things are getting better. I will say that a lot of churches are moving away from the stigma towards mental illness, but I think in the past there has been a stigma about if you struggle with anxiety or depression or substance use, that's a weakness of your faith, and that you need to either pray more or go to church more. And I personally don't think that this is true, or that these are evidence of weak faith any more than my high blood pressure is an evidence of my weak faith, or your diabetes is an evidence of your weak faith. And I think if you look through the Bible and look throughout Scripture, and I'm not a biblical expert by any means, but you see that people experience profound grief, depression, fear, emotional suffering, anxiety. And that doesn't mean that they loved God less. Sometimes the most faithful people are the people who struggle the most.
Amen. And I love the way you put that, if you've got high blood pressure, you'd never come to the conclusion that since you've got high blood pressure, you're walking far away from God, would you? You'd never conclude that. Just because you got some depression doesn't mean that you're far from God either. Brittany, would you like to add?
I agree. And I think that stigma is still, it does feel to me that it's less as well, versus, I mean, especially during medical school like 15 years ago, but still problematic in that while a symptom of depression can be guilt and blaming oneself, that I think also struggling with mental illness or any sort of problematic symptoms can lead someone to blame themselves and then to question, is this a personal failing?
Right.
And I think, again, in some church cultures, it doesn't feel safe to talk about that. So I think one of the things that Joe and I have talked about is, how wonderful it is to have our culture here be very open and accepting and understanding that, this is just like high blood pressure and asthma and diabetes. We can talk about these things. And certainly praying doesn't hurt. Using in all of our coping strategies, including praying and utilizing our support systems and, spending time in prayer or worshiping through music, all of those things help. But that's not a causative problem.
Right.
That's not why we're feeling badly.
Well, during the month of June, we have Mental Health Month, and I actually think Mental Health Month is May, but it doesn't work on my calendar that way, so I moved it to June. But we spent some time thinking about this, but what makes my heart really sore is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I'm walking down the hall after worship, and I hear one of our members talking to another member saying, listen, my therapist has done world of good for me. Let me give you their number. And I love to hear that conversation in the hallway. All right, so now we're going to turn the corner a little bit to a subject that we all wanted to touch base on, which is suicide. Okay? Now, what are the warning signs concerning suicide that we should watch for? And how can we be a part of the solution? So you're going to give us some hints about what the warning signs are, and then how can a church community be on the right side of this issue helping people? Who would like to go first? Okay, you go first.
I think just to talk about some warning signs, and I think we all need to work on getting more comfortable about talking about this topic. It's not an easy topic to talk about. But if you have friends or family members who are talking a lot or talking at all about wanting to die or feeling hopeless, if they're withdrawing from the family or withdrawing from activities that they used to enjoy, if they start giving away possessions or things that are really important to them, if they start using substances more, if they have sudden dramatic changes in mood, or if they start talking about how much they're a burden and how much people could be better off without them. Those are all like warning signs that there could be something deeper going on with depression and suicidal ideation. And so the thing that I think is most important for everyone to hear is that you need to listen, but not be afraid to ask directly. Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? Like, you can ask that to a friend or a family member, and it's okay. And asking it doesn't put the idea in their head and make them think, okay, well, now I'm going to do it. I think we need to know that, like, asking about it can be helpful, and then staying connected and taking action if you need to get the people professional help when they need it. But also being a listening ear and checking in and saying, like, I just wanted to see how this was going and wanted to see how I could be a support to you.
Okay. Would you like to add anything?
Absolutely. I think just to echo what Joe said, I remember in training being told multiple times, to remember ourselves and also to try to help educate, especially parents working with young people, that asking someone about if they're having suicidal thoughts, if they're having thoughts about wanting to hurt themselves, does not plant that idea in their heads. And really, maybe that is a way of opening a door to be able to talk about that, because it is such a, I think in general, hard topics are hard to bring up with other people. And so I would, again, agree with what Joe already shared. I think being able to, be a safe place to talk about hard things, to encourage people that, you're there for them and that we want to help them. Also recognizing that, like, when we're close with someone emotionally, we can help identify if they need help. And we don't have to be the person who is taking all of that burden, right? So it's, helping them share what's going on and then finding how are we getting you help? So it's not owning that either. So again, being a safe person, helping them talk about that, and then helping them access professional help.
Okay. And I hear what we can do is we talk about being the hands and the feet of Christ. We can also be the ears of Christ and listen to people. And that'd be a good thing to do. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this over the years, but I have a touch of that ADHD you mentioned. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I believe it's called. And now that's something both of you see. What kind of guidance can you share with parents or youth who need to navigate these waters? So help the parents out there figure out how to help their children, or if they're youth, you can maybe even speak directly to the youth. Would you go first this time, Brittany?
So I think what's interesting about ADHD is that it can present so differently. I end up seeing not only kids and teenagers, but also adults who have been coping throughout their lives and now have sort of the demands have outpaced their coping strategies as life has gotten more complex. So I think, it can look like I'm sort of inattentive and I'm daydreaming and maybe my grades take a dip, but maybe not because I'm not struggling academically in that way. Or it can be maybe what we sort of stereotypically think about as sort of a hyperactive. Often we think about boys, and boys are more likely to be diagnosed.
Really? That's surprising to me.
I think one of the reasons I talk with parents, depending on how someone's symptoms present, about helping to think about ADHD through a different lens, is that when a kid, teenager, or even if we're thinking about ourselves, if we are, because of ADHD, struggling with blurting out, being verbally impulsive, maybe having road rage in traffic or getting into car accidents because of impulsivity, if we're having social problems because of impulsivity, or again, seeming like we're not listening to parents, not following directions, seeming like we're doing those things intentionally when maybe there's more of a, gosh, we're just struggling. Sometimes that's not as clear. Sometimes it looks more intentional. And so I think trying to have that shift, understanding this is something that we can improve with maybe some discussions with teachers and schools, having a plan to change how we're seated in class, organizational strategies at home, having organization broken down differently. Medication can be very effective. Lots of different ways to treat this, but also thinking about how, like you're not a bad kid. We need to think about this differently.
Right. And understand that that's the last line. You're not a bad kid, okay? You might be a handful, but you're not a bad kid. Now, before you answer, let me ask a question of the congregation. How many of you would say that you yourself have struggled with this? You have a child in your family or a cousin or somebody that you're familiar with who's had this hyperactivity attention deficit. Raise your hand. All right. See, that's what I thought. Okay. And see, now I'm shifting. See, Sam and I both have this. And so a meeting with us is, I'm sure Lily goes home just scratching her head. And now we have Carly and Lily and Denise. We're getting more females in this equation. And so I'm sure they're all going, I have no idea what these guys are talking about because they're all over the place. But for Sam and I, it's worked together. We understand the dance. All right. So would you like to add anything?
Just a few things, but
Please.
y'all both said pretty much everything correctly, and I think you gave good answers. I wanted to mention that not only are you not a bad kid if you have ADHD, you're not a bad parent if your kid has ADHD. I think that's so important.
Amen.
It's not caused by bad parenting, and it's not caused by your kid being lazy. And kids with ADHD hear negative feedback all day long from their teachers and from their parents, and sometimes from their other peers. And so that can be hard. ADHD is not a flaw in your character or in your child's character. It's a difference in how the brain manages attention and focus, and what we call executive functioning. So I think we should try and notice and encourage strengths as much as we can in our children with ADHD, and point those out, and uplift them, because it can be hard to live with ADHD. And I will say this, and I am a prescriber, so I mean, I'm pro therapy, but I'm also very pro med, especially in this case. Meds work really well, so parents, don't be ashamed or feel like you're a failure if your kids need to take some medications for ADHD.
All right. We're down to the last two questions, and Brittany just gave me the need to speed up thing. So we're going to do this last two questions, and we're going to do this one sort of in the speed round. It appears to me, and this is from my visits with people, it appears to me that depression and dementia get confused sometimes. People fear they're getting dementia when they're actually really experiencing depression. This is the pastor speaking. Do you see this? And if you do, what do you recommend?
So I would absolutely agree. I
Okay.
think that there is a very frequent, to try to speed this up, a very frequent occurrence of folks who, and again, typically more older folks versus your 20-year-old who's worried about this, older folks who are concerned that they could be having dementia. Part of that could be, this is something, I have a friend who's been diagnosed with this, so now I'm really worried because it's on my mind. But very commonly, that is more likely to be related to depression. In fact, there's even a word called pseudo-dementia, where as a part of depression, we know that depression can impair concentration. It can make our thoughts really sluggish. Our brains are not working like normal, such that it almost feels like we have dementia, but it really is depression. And as depression is lifting, our cognitive function goes back to normal, our baseline. So that is a really helpful thing to look at. Going to get professional help, cognitive screening, depression screening, plus other blood work, because at any age, we also want to just check things like thyroid levels, other physical health markers to make sure that we're not missing anything as we're evaluating for depression or other mental health concerns. But especially as we age, it just gets more complicated.
What would you like to add?
Anything to add to that? That was perfect.
Okay. All right. So, and that helps us with our time too. So thank you. But I see that when people will say, you know, I feel like this is, and first of all, in our office, we talked about this. Correct me if I get this wrong. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm worried about this, I think I'm getting dementia, the answer is,
You're probably okay because you're worried about it.
yeah. Yeah. If you're worried about getting it, you probably don't get it. It's the people who go, no, I got no problems with my cognitive function. I'm doing great. Those are the people who probably have it. All right. So here's the last question. As I have aged, my confession, I've become more moody. Is this typical, or should Joanne be worried?
I want to hear what Joanne has to say, maybe after the service. But I will say, I was just being silly, but I will say that some changes in mood and anxiety are a normal part of getting older and of aging.
That's okay. I know I'm getting older. They've watched me for a long time.
Getting older. So stress, health issues, sleep changes, caregiving responsibilities, grief, and hormonal changes can all affect the way we feel and how irritable we are. So I think the question is, are we talking about occasional irritability, John, or are we talking about significant change in personality and functioning? So if your loved ones are saying you don't seem like yourself anymore,
Yeah.
it's worth paying attention to.
Okay.
Sometimes the closest people to us recognize things the fastest.
Okay. But you only deal with adolescents and children, right? If I'm in this chat room and I got to turn this way, okay? But book me for Tuesday at 10. But that's a good way of putting it. Is it irritable and it just comes and goes, or is it long term? And would somebody look at me and say, you really are changing? And so I don't think we're at that point yet, but maybe just months. We're months away from that. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for coming. Let's give them a round of applause. And I'm about to say a few words, a little devotion, but do y'all want to say any final remarks about mental health?
I turned my microphone off, but I'll say it loud. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about this, John. I think it's so important for the church to be open and talking about mental health issues. And I'm just really honored to have a chance to participate in it.
I agree. I think we really appreciate this because not all churches and not all places would be so welcoming.
Well, thank you both. And I'll dismiss you. And I promise I won't keep y'all but 5 or 6 more minutes, maybe 8. But thank you both.